Welcome to Tim's Antique Trains. Today's video is special. Recently I headed up to see a friend of my uncle and got a personal tour of his highly detailed DCC HO layout. His layout is in stark contrast to mine because of the high amount of detail, modern equipment, and it operates on iPad-controlled DCC. The layout is about 8 feet by 16 feet. Now, without further ado, let me introduce the owner and tour guide, Vic.
Welcome to the Victor Creek Railroad. My name is Victor Capanos, and I want to show you our whole layout. It represents the Chicago Northwestern Railroad primarily from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, all the way to Maribel, Wisconsin, and then finally to Denmark, Wisconsin. But just to give you a little bit of a background on the railroad itself, the Chicago Northwestern Railroad was officially chartered on June 7th, 1859, after purchasing the assets of the Chicago, St. Paul, and Fond du Lac Railway, which was established in 1855 and failed in 1859. By 1882, the Chicago Northwestern had purchased 5 more railways and visited cities such as Chicago, Minneapolis, and even Omaha, Nebraska. In 1935, the Great Depression hit the railroad industry very hard, and both in freight and the lack of passenger service. The revenue being down, the Chicago Northwestern declared bankruptcy in 1935 and did not recover until after World War II. The railway started passenger service between Chicago and the Twin Cities and branded itself as the 400 series because it's 400 miles between Chicago and St. Paul, Minneapolis. In 1939, the new diesel E3 locomotives were introduced, along with its lightweight passenger cars, and you'll see a copy of those on our train layout. In 1956, unfortunately, all steam engines were replaced with diesel power. In 1972, the ownership of the railway was officially transferred to the employees of the railroad. In 1980, the Rock Island Railroad was purchased to allow for mainline service between the Twin Cities and Kansas City. In 1995, the thriving Chicago Northwestern was wholly purchased by the Union Pacific and merged into their system. At its peak, the Chicago Northwestern had over 12,000 miles of track. In 1969, 400 service was finally stopped north of Green Bay. I actually don't have the exact records as to when service stopped between Chicago and Green Bay. I'd like to now show you our layout, which we started about 2 years ago, and the architect and the designer of the layout is my son Matt Capanos. He's both an artist and a handyman, and so he did all of the design, and he did all of the electrical work and all of the connections, and did a fantastic job in designing it all, and you'll see some of his artistry as you see the layout. Since then, he's moved out of state, and he's been replaced by a new partner, which I'd like to introduce. My partner and good friend, Wayne Hessel.
Hi.
And for a long time, he and I played together in the same band called the Sugar Bush Boys. So his father was a railroad engineer. He was a railroad engineer for the Railroad Museum here in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And turns out that my wife's father was also an engineer down in Alabama and in states to the southeast. Thank you. What you're looking at is Manitowoc, Wisconsin, or our version of Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Out here we would normally have Lake Michigan. But the buildings are represented, first of all, is the Manitowoc Aluminum Goods, which is no longer there, but was employed several thousand during World War II. We here have our own brewery, and we call it the Kingsbury Brewery, which up until the late 70s, Kingsbury beer was brewed in Manitowoc. Here we have an aluminum processing plant, basically a foundry, and we use parts, junk parts, and they are processed and melted down here in this foundry. Here we have an exact replica of a engine repair servicing building that exists today in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Here we have Berger Boat Company, and during the Korean War they were known for building minesweepers, which were all made out of wood and brass, and they still are in existence today. They make high-priced yachts and that sort of thing that run into multi-millions. This building here is Hamilton Manufacturing Company, a place where I worked during my college years, and they are out of business also, but they had facilities in Manitowoc and Two Rivers. Now as you look down, we see our 400 series passenger service, and that ran all the way from Chicago to Michigan. And this is the train station, which is almost a replica of the station as it looked in 1920. The tall building you see over there is the Holy Family Hospital. And then the back down, as you follow the street down, that's the courthouse. And then over here we have St. Matthew's Church, and Matthew, my son, designed it. That was the name of the church. Since he built it, it's St. Matthew's Church. And over here we have the fire station, and then of course we have the railroad yard. Now all of our buildings, for the most part, are lit, and you can see the streets lights are also on. And so at this time I'm going to turn all the lights on so that you can see what it looks like with all the lights turned on. Yep. So this is the daytime version of it, and then we're going to we'll turn the outside lights off. As you can see, we even have a helicopter on top of the hospital in case of emergency. When my son was building the train repair station, it took him about 40 hours just to construct and put it together, and that's not counting the lighting. But all the lighting was designed by my son Matt, and we tried to make it as realistic as possible. You notice the street lights, every street has street lights. Okay. Now we're going to go back to daytime so we can see. As we move forward, now we're heading towards Maribel in Denmark, but in between there is a river that runs through. And the river eventually empties out into Lake Michigan. And this whole part was was designed and crafted by my son, and it actually includes a couple thrustles that are not normally there, at least not this fancy, but we enhanced it a little bit. And if you notice on the river, we've got boats and canoes and people fishing, people camping. And all of the rock work was designed and built by my son Matt.
This concludes part 1 of the Victory Creek Railroad Tour. Stay tuned for part 2 coming very soon. In the meantime, please support me by liking the video and helping me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers. Thank you for watching Tim's Antique Trains.